Today's scripture reading brings us to 2 Samuel chapter 19. At this point in time, Absalom has been killed, and David is in sorrow because of that fact, and he is not in Jerusalem. That's kind of important facts to understand as we get to looking here. So I have this chapter broken down into 4 sections. The first 8 verses I have titled, Joab Causes David's Mourning to Cease. The end of chapter 18, you see in verse number 33, the king was much moved when he heard that Absalom had been killed. David's heart just breaks. Now, this is the third son that he has lost, the infant child, and then Amnon, his eldest son that Absalom had killed, and now Absalom. And his heart's just broken, and that's the way it starts here in the beginning of chapter 19. So what is happening is the people are coming back from this great victory. You have to kind of picture the situation. The king's been run out of town. Absalom, his son, has come and assumed the throne, and his people have been run out of town, and they're out there in the wilderness. Absalom and his men come out, and they have this great big, war, this battle royale, and they emerge victorious. And this is a wonderful thing that, they have been able to bring their king, who they trusted. They went out and sacrificed to go out with him instead of keeping their cushy place at the palace or in Jerusalem. They sacrificed to go out and live nomadic lives for however long it was going to take because they supported David. And the time has come, and David wins. They win this great big victory, and they come back, and you can imagine how jubilant they are. And their king is just beside himself. He has no joy in this great victory. And he's making the people feel as if they had done something wrong, and that he cared more about this murdering traitor in the son Absalom and what they had, because that's the way a lot of people saw him, than he did them, the ones that risked their lives to fight for him. And so the army it went from a day of celebration to a day of mourning here. And Joab's like, dude, you got to snap out of it. And he gives him this talk and explains these things unto him, what is going on. And David snaps out of it, and he goes and he greets people at the gate and recognizes their valor and everything in which they had fought for him. Verses 9 through 15, I have that titled, Judah Desires to Bring Back the King. Now, in a couple things to note about this section. The first is that Joab has been displaced Joab was the captain of David's army, but we see in verse number 13, David says, and say ye to Amasa, art thou not of my bone and of my flesh? And this was David's nephew, if I'm not mistaken. God do so to me, and more also, if thou be not captain of the host before me continually in the room of Joab. David is promoting Absalom's top general to be his top general in place of Joab. David has evidently found out that Joab was the one who disobeyed his orders, killed Absalom, and now he is taking Amasa and putting him as the head of his army. This does a couple things. Number one, it demonstrates that there's a forgiveness that's being extended unto the opposing side, and a fresh start is available. And secondly, it's disciplining Joab for, what Absalom and what we have already discussed. Now, in this section, again, David is not at Jerusalem, and David is not really the king at the moment, because, as you read there in verses 9 and 10, David was king. David left. Absalom assumed the throne. Absalom went out and is now been killed. So, they're kind of without a king right now. And David, instead of just going back and marching in and saying, all right, everybody is under my authority. He wants to be invited back. He wants these people, because again, a lot of them may have been loyal. He fought loyalty of some unto Saul, and he's got people that have been loyal unto Absalom. He was this big celebrity king, and some loyal unto him. And so what he wants to be invited back. He does not want to be king out of force, but king by invitation. So he sends word out to his home tribe in Judah, where he was king at for 7 years before he assumed the throne over all of Israel. And he sends word out unto him, hey, are you looking to invite the king back? And what this reminded me of was this. It illustrates the point that we oftentimes displace King Jesus. Instead of Jesus being the king in our life, we displace him with Absaloms in our life, right? We get things to come in that have no business being there, and because of that, King Jesus has been displaced. He's been kind of forced out. But then what does he do? He does not come in and say, you will serve me, but he woos us and he invites, right? He's like, do you not want me to be the Lord of your life? And he's waiting for that invitation for us to make him Lord over all. So that's verses 9 through 15. So Judah does. They say, yes, we want you back. And they go essentially to get David to march him back into Jerusalem. Now, in verses 16 through 40, I have that there's essentially three different things that are dealt with in these verses. Shimei, Mephibosheth, and Barzillia. These are things that have taken place since David has been out of Jerusalem. Shimei, if you recall, was the one who followed David, was throwing stones at David, and was cursing David. And David's nephew, Abishai, he wanted to kill him. Then David withheld him from doing so, and they just went on. David showed him mercy then. Shimei now comes to David, and he bows down before him, and he's begging his forgiveness. Abishai once again wants to kill him, but David says this is not a time for revenge. This is a time for rejoicing. We're not going to kill him today. And it shows Shimei grace. Then Mephibosheth, he comes unto David. Now, if you remember, there was between him and Ziba, or Ziba, however you want to say it, tomatoes. But Ziba was he was a servant of Saul. He was the one that brought Mephibosheth's presents unto David, and Ziba was the one who David had told to go serve Mephibosheth. Ziba came to David when he was out in the wilderness and said, Mephibosheth, he said maybe they're going to give him the throne now, which is apparently a lie, as we see here. But in David's haste, he gave all of Mephibosheth's things unto Ziba. Well, now it comes to pass, you see Ziba here in these, verses? He's there in verse 17, him and his servants. They go to welcome David back. But Mephibosheth here makes this journey to go greet David as well. And he has not shaved. He has not done several things that's mentioned there. He's not trimmed his beard. He's not dressed his feet or washed his clothes from the day the king departed until the day he came again in peace. He was in mourning, and he makes his trek to tell David his side of the story, and that is, my servant told me he was going to go sadly ask for me or something, and then he took off. That's pretty much how it went down, and we can tell why. There's no clear answer whether Ziba was in the wrong or Mephibosheth, but by Mephibosheth's words here, it very well appears that he was sincere, because he gives this answer here, and he says, well, I guess I should show it to you on here, right? Verse number 27, he hath slandered thy servant unto my lord the king. Talking about Ziba, he says, but my lord the king is as an angel of God. Do therefore what is good in thine eyes. He's saying, David, I trust your judgment. You're just as if the word's coming from God. You do whatever you think is right. He says, for all my father's house were but dead men before the Lord, yet didst thou set thy servant among them, eat of thine own table. What right have I therefore to cry any more for anything? He said, you made me a part of your circle. I have nothing to want. So David here, he essentially just splits everything gives half unto Ziba, half unto Mephibosheth, and he essentially washes his hands of the situation there. And then Barzillia, he was a Gileadite that had met David and brought all of these great provisions unto him. He did not want anything. He did not have to give answer. He did not have to ask for forgiveness. He came to rejoice in this great day. And David extended a hand unto him, and he wanted him to come to Jerusalem to essentially live out his days in peace, wouldn't have to want for nothing, live the life of a king, you should say. And he says, man, I'm 80 years old. I don't really want to do that. He bowed out graciously, but he said, but my Kimham, that's how you say his name there. You see it in verse 37, 30, 38. That's his son. That's his son. He says, he'll go. And so Kimham goes with David in Barzillai's place. He enjoys the blessings. He enjoys these great blessings by going to Jerusalem, being a guest of David, being blessed extremely by David, the king. He enjoys those because that's what his father had bestowed upon him. His father had laid the groundwork so that his son could be blessed in that manner. And then lastly here, verses 41 through 43, I have that titled Squabbling Still Between the 10 and the 2. I'm talking about the children of Israel, the 10 tribes, and the 2, the men of Judah. In these few verses, we see that they're bickering because the tribe of Judah went up and they got David and they're bringing him down to Jerusalem. And the other 10 tribes, they essentially weren't invited to come. And they wanted to take part of David in his return. And, the big celebration and get credit for that and all that stuff. But that they start squabbling in these few verses over that very thing. So you still see there's tension. There's been tension all the way from Saul's day, and there's still tension today between the 10 tribes and the 2 tribes, the men of Israel and the men of Judah. And this essentially is setting the stage for something that happens in the next chapter. So that's going to be 2 Samuel. I don't know if I said first. 2 Samuel chapter 19. Hope this has been a help and blessing unto you. Lord willing, we'll see you tomorrow.